Hello again. It's finally October. Hi there. So, yeah, I am super excited. I'm making more monsters. That's nothing new for October, though, of course. But I'm very quietly, so it doesn't pick it up on the phone here, or the camera. I'm listening to Halloween-themed stuff. Actually, it's Susie and the Banshees at the moment. And excitedly preparing a mold of one of the little monsters that I have sculpted with my monster clay. I have a bowl here that it's just a kind of cereal bowl from Walmart kind of thing. But if you look down inside, you can just make out my little critter down there. So I didn't need the entire space, the volume. I didn't want to waste all that rubber. Plus, it makes it hard to demold if it's too thick. So I built up a whole bunch of clay around it to kind of get a relatively thick shell around it, but not too thick anymore. I wanted to leave a big open spot on the top here so that I could pour it so it'll stay flat, because I'm going to end up turning it upside down to pour the plastic into it later on sometime. But thankfully, the bottom of the bowl was big and flat, so I just took my heat gun to the bottom of the monster, melted the very surface of his flat base, and squashed him down real good so he gets kind of glued down in there. So I'm taking my Mold Star 15 Slow here, and it's a platinum cure, so it should be relatively strong, good stuff from Smooth On. These folks are the best. They're always super helpful and nice about everything, all the different kinds of projects I've done in the last several years. Every time I had any questions or anything or suggestions that I wanted, they were always really cool about it. So definitely get a hold of them if you ever need any kind of rubber or mold making or plastics, and they're just fantastic folks. I'm not paid to sponsor them or anything for this video. I just think they're really cool people. Make really great products. So the good thing about this Mold Star series, this is the slow, like I said, so you'll have about a little less than an hour, about 50 minutes-ish worth of mixing time and working with it. I don't need anywhere near that amount of time with this, but just in case it takes me some sort of unforeseen messing around with it, it's nice to have that extra amount of time. I may not use this one. I may use some of their other products for other molds that I'm going to be making, but for now, I'm going to give this one a shot and see how well it works this time. So I've taken, it's a really easy 50-50 mix. So I've taken half, down here you can, I'm not sure if you can see them, but I've got a couple of little bitty cups, disposable cups, and I've put two little cups of part A, 2 cups of part B in there, made them almost exactly the same height on each. And this is after I've taken water and I've poured it into here so that I can pour it back out into the cup so I can get a measurement. And then I poured those into cups and counted how many cups they would take to do it. Interestingly enough, I managed to get exactly 4 cups out of it to fill up all the way to the top here. So that's pretty cool. We'll see how well it actually plays out, because there's always a little bit of waste. But yeah, so you don't want moisture in the mold when you're making it any kind of a rubber mold or anything. Because it doesn't like to cure correctly with too much moisture. So I dabbed it all out really carefully with a paper towel, and then I've let it sit for quite a while and let it evaporate. So now it should be ready to go. So now all I really need to do, I'll trade things out here. Now all I really need to do is take all of my part A and B here, mix it up, and then we can start pouring. This is the not so fun part to watch. It's just slow. Thankfully, I've got a lot of time to do this with this slow Mold Star version here. It's really nice. I don't have to worry about rushing some types of plastics, especially the expanding foam that I've used before. Some of those, you only have a matter of a few seconds once you start mixing them. So you have to be really, really careful to mix it really well, really quickly, and then be done with it. Pour it, wait for it to expand. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about that with this stuff. Okay, one. I'm just using dowels here for clean them to make sure I don't have any kind of dust or nasty oils or something crappy that'll mess with this. You got to be careful what you use for all of the products that you mess with, mold making and plastic works, because you don't want any kind of, you know, sulfur or some other kinds of chemicals that might inhibit the curing. Some other time I'll show you a fun trick I've learned from special effects. Actually, more, not so much, I learned them from, partially from special effects folks in the industry, but mostly the trick I'm thinking of, I learned from model, like art toy people, which is more or less what I'm doing here. But that's a trick for another day. But what is he talking about? Well, you'll just have to tune back in sometime and see how that plays out. Now notice I'm not using the same stick. It's not terribly crucial since this is such a slow thing, but you don't ever want to contaminate one with the other, of course, until you're actually mixing the stuff, because it'll give you all sorts of problems. Uneven curing, some things curing too fast, some not ever at all, some depending on what materials you're using. So it's always a good idea to have a couple of different stir sticks. Now before I use this, of course, the directions say to stir well before using, and so I did, but I used one stick for one material and the other stick for the other. I'm not sure technically if a wooden stick is your best choice, but I've used it several times before and I've not had a problem so far, so I'm not all that concerned with it. Let's hope I am justifiably not concerned this time. I've never used the slow before. I've used their brush-on rubbers. That sounds dirty, but that's not what I mean. I've used their brush-on rubber mold making material mostly. It's really good stuff. It allows you to make a thick enough rubber that it won't just pour off, and it's a relatively quick or relatively short pot life. But it allows you quite a bit of time to mix it really nicely and get it started onto your original material, your object. And the cool thing about it being relatively thick like that is that it'll kind of ooze into all the details that you brush it onto and kind of, you know, dab it on and things like that, and then brush it really nicely. But it's thick enough that you can put it on, you know, horizontal and vertical, and horizontal is in upside down kinds of surfaces without it completely draining off and being a problem. It's really great stuff if you're having to do molds that can't be really, really, really thick due to size, for instance, or they're objects that can't be moved very easily. You know, like I've seen a bunch of people do like architectural detail filaments and things, or filaments? That's not the word I'm looking for. Gosh darn it. I hate it when words escape me. I used to teach modern architecture. You'd think I could remember the dang term I'm looking for. Okay, I think I've scraped all the edges a few times. wiped it around a few other times enough, and then mixed in the middle several times here, I think I've got a good enough mix. So, and my hand's starting to cramp up. So, I think it's probably about time. So, I'm going to scrape this off so I don't drip all over my countertop here and have to clean it up later. I'm going to move it over here so I have an easier pour and you can see it better. Okay, now one trick with this stuff to keep it from getting bubbles in there too badly is to pour from quite a ways up, and it kind of reduces the bubbles that you might have created in it. And it kind of oozes down and around over things better that way too. I'm hoping to do this well enough to eliminate bubbles down and around underneath the edges of things. But in order to kind of encourage a little less of that, I'm going to periodically kind of push it around. Because if you push up against, kind of like I was talking about with the brush on stuff, kind of push against it and pull away a few times, it can pull bubbles off of surfaces a little bit better. Doesn't always work, but a lot of times it's really helpful. Whoop, don't trip everywhere. I don't really want to make rubber molds in my countertop, no matter how antiquated they are. They're not that historical. I don't need to preserve them. I'm not terribly worried. The way I built the inside of this is kind of a sweep around. You probably couldn't see it on the camera because it's so hard to see down in there. And my lighting is terrible in my kitchen because I have these crazy orange flickering lights like flames. But I've created it with kind of a sweeping arc to the cross sections all the way around the outsides of the mold, so that it'll be, you know, a nicer, smoother kind of shape to it in the end. But more importantly, as I'm pouring it in here, it doesn't create great big bubbles in it that might migrate into the monster itself as it tries to pull out or something. Probably not something that would be a problem, but I didn't want to run any risks, because it's never fun to mess up your mold and then have to start all over again. It's even more unpleasant to mess up your mold and mess up your original and have to start from word one. He says, because he's had to do that before. Kind of scraping it out at the bottom here, kind of promote it moving down. Come on, just a little bit more in there. It's a little low for what I wanted. Might be just a little on the thin side on top of the noggin if I don't get a little bit more in there. I don't know why I keep calling it noggin. It's just such a silly word to use. I noticed I was doing that when I was sketching. Normally don't use those words. The colorful colloquialisms were more of my, or are all still more of my dad's thing. He had all sorts of fun things that he used to say. I don't hear him say it very often anymore because I don't live there, but the cat's wandering around like crazy, like, what's going on in here? You're not allowed to do things without my approval. Yep, should have mixed a little bit more, but I think it might be enough. The good thing about the slow is that if I decided that this wasn't going to be enough, I could mix up a little bit more really quickly and pour it in to add it, because it's not going to be far enough along the curing process to mess it up. If it were one of the faster drying things, you probably shouldn't do that. In fact, I would say don't do that normally. Especially with your really fast drying stuff, that's a really bad idea. But with like the contrary to what I just said, the brush-on stuff that I was talking about earlier is actually really a good example of the opposite of that, because they say to do one coat relatively thin on it, and then after it's had a little bit of time to cure, you go back in on it and do another layer, but before it's fully cured, of course, and it'll bond with itself really nicely that way. Helps build up the thickness of things and hold the form better. I swear, I don't know how I time this so that goes off when I'm recording. I don't even know how often anybody can hear the Simpsons have to go off on my phone there, but so the good thing about a small mold is that I can move it around a bit, thump it on the wooden block here that I've got, and it can help bubbles migrate towards the top. This isn't really normally something you really do with rubber molds, but when you do plaster molds for like slip molds like I do periodically, that's really important because the plaster will hold a heck of a lot of bubbles in there and you've got to make them all migrate out. But yeah, this is looking pretty good. See how deep that is. Oh, that's not very deep at all. Yeah, it might work, but it's a lot thinner than I expected it to be. Oh well. Que sera, sera. If it doesn't work, I can make another mold. So, yep, that's it. About 4 hours from now, I'll be able to, 4 or 5 hours roughly. I never did know, with the faster cure things, it didn't really make as much difference. But with the slower cure time, like this is roughly 50 minutes, it makes a bigger difference. But one thing I've never really known, and I probably ought to ask, is the work time included in the demold time, or do you add the demold time to that? Typically, for other types of things, it's only like 15 minutes or something that you have 15 minutes or something like that you have to work with stuff. So adding just a handful of extra minutes doesn't make much difference. But since this is nearly an hour extra that it might be adding, it might make a little difference. So I might come in and be demolding around midnight or so. So that'll be fun. So it'll be boring as heck to sit here and stare at it until then. So I'm going to cut off the camera and come back with another short video of me probably getting disappointed by getting bubbles in here or something. I may not even know until I make a casting. We'll see. I'm going to see if I can demold this in a next video. See you soon. Hello. Not sure how much battery life I have here, but we're going to see what we can do about demolding this thing. So that's kind of loud, but that's my heat gun cooling down. It wasn't ready at midnight. Oh, there we go. It wasn't ready at midnight like I was hoping it would be. It was still super soft and squashy. Squashies? That's not even a word. So I was going to come back a little later on in the middle of the night there and try to demold it then, but then I passed out. So I decided it was probably better to just wait until morning anyway. And as you can, well, get that out of there. As you can see, it's not squishy anymore. It's definitely squishy, but not like soft jello kind of thing or anything anymore. So I didn't make you sit through like half an hour of slowly heating the bowl up with my heat gun, because it was just boring. As is most art and the actual doing of it. But it wasn't anything new or surprising. Heat guns are great though. This is the slow part though. If it weren't COVID age, the age of COVID, I would have gone out and bought myself a like a Tupperware or something that would fit this general size of a critter. But I don't want to go out if I can help it these days. And it's always good to challenge yourself to work with what you've got. So I used this, and the unfortunate part about that though is that it is not flexible since it's porcelain. Actually not porcelain, just ceramic. It's, I imagine, something a lot less. It could be porcelain, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Anyway, so ceramic is not going to flex and let me get this out of here very easily. So instead, I have to rely on the clay's natural behaviors and its abilities, qualities, and do it the slow way. But we'll get there eventually. So, most likely this video is going to be me babbling about this as you see me continue to slowly pull clay out of here. And I have a funny feeling my 30-something% battery life I just saw a second ago, I think, is not going to be enough for that, for the completion of this. So when that runs out, I'll let it stop, and when I finally get to something more exciting, I'll start a new recording. Okay, so weird stuff. My battery's being really weird. It went from 100% to 70% to 42% just now, all like that. Weird stuff. Oh well. We'll see what we can do. So in the last video I was starting to take the clay out from around this. Then it cut off almost immediately as I started saying that I was about to turn it off so that you didn't have to sit through me doing all that. So I heated it a little bit more, took a regular cheap spoon to kind of gouge the stuff out of there. But since I was keeping the bowl warm, it helped it pull out. You can see that once I got a ways in there, it just kind of slid off of there. And it wasn't stuck to the rubber, of course, because that's what rubber does. So I can get rid of this, since it's not as big a problem getting stuck to my cutting board now. All right, so now it's just a matter of carefully pulling this out of there. I'm also going to be probably out of, it's still kind of warm. I'm hoping to not yank apart my original so I can make another mold and show you a different molding, or my original, not my mold. So I can show you a different molding process at some point here pretty soon. But what I'm doing is just going around and kind of pulling and kind of trying to release the edges a bit, not pulling too hard because I don't want to yank it apart or pull anything and tear any kind of edges or something like that. But then I get that. And I get bubble popping for some reason. So, yeah, it was warmed enough. It pulled the stuck part of the bottom of him right off of there. That's okay. So now I'm going to do the same kind of thing around the bottom of him. Just kind of pulling back around, holding on to him and firmly to the rest of it so I'm not squashing anything. and then just kind of, it looks like I didn't seal it very well, so I've got this little thin booger edge kind of thing going on there. I'll trim those off so it's nice and smooth and clean. But I'm just kind of doing that around the edges. Just do it over and over and over again so that it'll, oh, yep, looks like I'm pulling tail off there. So I'll have to be careful. I may have to remold it or resculpt it in order to make the second mold. That's the way it goes though. Might not even get them out of here without pulling them to pieces. But that's okay. That's how clay works. Not a problem. It's not like it's made to be, you know, hard plastic like this will end up being, and then a lot more rigid and strong. I'll probably make it out of resin because resin's good stuff. Oh yeah, I'm probably going to mess this guy up entirely trying to get him out of there. So I'll probably make a cast and then make a mold of that one. So I'm kind of pushing in from the back side and just as I pull out, so it kind of pulls around the outsides of it. Kind of do that as I go. I'm trying to keep in mind where the spiky parts are on him, so that I'm pulling kind of away from that as best as I can, because I don't want to yank pieces, or since they could be kind of tough, I don't want them to tear my mold or anything like that. So it's slow, and I'm definitely tearing him apart. You can already see that I'm yanking his tail off of the body because I didn't have it fused together that well. I could have, I didn't realize this stuff was going to be so stiff, this mold. So I could have managed to get it even thinner around the sides than I had planned for. But I didn't want to go too thin. Otherwise it won't hold together and it might tear or something a little too easily. So this is slow, not so easy to do, especially since I'm trying not to destroy the original, but it's about to anyway. Oh, yep, shove my thumb into it, that'll do it. Yeah, who cares? Good thing about being a sculptor is you can always redo it if you need to. But the mold should be okay. Once I learn how this works, subsequent demolding shouldn't be too bad compared to this. Nowhere near this slow and painful. Okay, let's just yank him apart. Why not? Oh, yep, throw my thumb in there because I slipped again. Pull stuff out. Oop, ha, how about that? Yanked everything out of it, no problem, except for the spike. So I've got a little clay in there left from the spike, but I'll have to get that out of there, of course, but I'll take a X-Acto knife and clean up the edges of the bottom here so it's not so tricky to pull apart next time. But look at all that detail in there. You can't even see all the nice texture. Nobody ever wants to get a hold of me unless I'm recording. These days, I guess it makes sense since I record almost all the time. Anyway, so yeah, you can't really see it on screen, I'm sure, but all the fine little scratch details that I put onto his skin, all that little detail is actually in the mold, thankfully. So that'll be really cool. It'll be a challenge to get that clay out of there, but I won't make you watch me do all that slowness. That is, oh, I thought I almost had it. Oh, ah, ha, ha. Never mind, it wasn't as painful as I thought it would be. All right, so just a little bit of cleaning it up, making sure any of the little extra bits of texture and things didn't leave. You can see a little bit of speckling maybe in there. Get rid of all that junk so it's not stuck into the plastic when you're finished casting. And there you go. Mold 1. of a series of monsters that I shall be making. So, as soon as my plastic comes in, I'll pour you a cast of this. Let you see that process too. So, in order to get this remaining junk out of here, I'm just going to use my heat gun to warm it up again. Some of it I can just pull out, but I'm going to warm it up again so it's soft and almost liquid. And that'll help me pull it out of there. I don't want to put it in the dishwasher, obviously, because then it'd clog up all my drains and things, even though the hot water would help get it off of there. But then it would just deposit it into my washing machine. So I don't want to do that. And I don't want to throw it in the microwave because I don't trust the speed of that, and I'm not sure how that's going to affect the clay in the long run. I really just don't know. I'd rather not risk it if I can help it. But as you can tell, I'm getting most of it off just by pulling. So anyway, that's not fun stuff to watch. So I'll do that off camera sometime. And here's my remaining kind of mangled original, but it will make a cool little monster, I think, when we're done with him. So there's one, and I'll show you the rest of the monsters in new videos that will be coming soon. Thanks for joining me.